I am working on a complete sequel for Super Mario 64 running natively on the Nintendo 64. It's almost done at this point, with over 30 new levels and about 4 times as much content as the original game, and a completely rewritten and optimized engine. As part of this, I don't want to just add more levels and call it a day. Similar to how Mario Bros. 1 and Mario Bros. 3 were released on the same console with a world of difference between their visuals, we want to get a similar visual upgrade. To that end goal, we're trying to get the most out of the Nintendo 64. This means not only a new engine, but because Mario 64's actors were made on ancient tools with little 3D modeling knowledge, completely from the ground up remade actors. This is all already done. So now I want to talk about my proposed visual and performance upgrades. Today, we will look at the Bob Omb model rework. We do want to stick to the original vision for the Bob Omb visuals. As such, we will use Mario 64's promotional art and the in-game paintings as our platonic ideal of what a Bob Omb is supposed to look like. And we will assume that the current Bob Omb's in-game visuals are the result of attempting to get these visuals, but having to reduce some detail to comply with the original game's performance limitations. Our goal will be to have the new model be cheaper or as cheap to render as before and also store in the ROM as before, while also increasing its texture resolutions, model details and fidelity. I've previously showcased the higher fidelity Goomba that also reduced its render time by about 30%. But we can do even better than that with a couple objectively true graphical improvements for the Bob Omb. I have to give a shout out to BioBack here for helping a ton with these models. He's been working on this game with me for a while now, and he's been polishing up all my work to prettify it. We both had a couple ideas on how to achieve a cheaper and prettier Bob Omb. Let's start simple, their eyes. This is what their eyes look like in Mario 64, and this is their texture. Now, even someone who's never optimized software before probably will instantly realize that we can cut off around half the texture, mirror it in the model, and get identical visuals. That would be an instant upgrade, but we can actually go way further. Not only are 2 eyes symmetrical to each other, but an eye itself has 2-way symmetry, allowing us to cut the resolution of this texture into an 8 with identical visuals to save precious memory and data bandwidth. But it's not only that. This eye originally actually uses a full color format despite being fully white with only 1-bit alpha channel, meaning we use about 4 times as much data per pixel as necessary for a 16th of the precision the console allows for. Putting it all together, we could reduce the performance impact of this texture by a factor of 32 with no visual difference, or even use that 4-bit alpha we gained to smoothen out the edges. I know that sounds completely ridiculous, but feel free to double check me on this. Of course, such a small texture only costs around 16 microseconds per Bob Omb anyway, so this 30 times speedups really is minor, but we actually value the visuals a little more. For that reason, we will quintuple the texture resolutions back up to instead get this really round looking eye. This now gets us a 4 times higher resolution with much better alpha precision, and look at the difference between how round these 2 textures look. But that's not even all we can do on his eye. His eyes don't need 4 polygons. Every vertex will be investigated here. We can instead cut the triangles like this and get identical visuals with half the triangle count. It sounds strictly superior at first, but there is a caveat to doing it this way. Cutting triangles like this means that the renderer will have to iterate more screen space pixels to try and render it because of the bigger area of the geometry. But for such small triangles on the Nintendo 64's low resolution and an average use case, I believe it is worth it. A technical 3D artist may still have objections about this, but there is an important piece of information you need to know that makes the N64 different from modern hardware. On modern hardware, we access memory in squares. The red marked pixels are loaded into memory but not drawn, while the green marked squares are both loaded and drawn to. Long skinny triangles like this have a load of unnecessary red area, which is bad. Unlike modern machines, due to how memory access works here, the Nintendo 64 is better at drawing horizontally long triangles than it is at drawing squarish ones. To my understanding, a 1x8 horizontal line will draw roughly 8 times as fast as an 8x1 vertical line, or 3 times as fast as a 3x3 square. Hearing that probably shocked a few 3D rendering experts, but this is just what we have to work with. Okay, halt. I need to talk about today's Video Werbegeldbezahler Mondly. Mondly is a language learning app, and they've given me a 65% off lifetime access discount code for their back to school sale. The program allows you to learn 41 different foreign languages with respect to your native native language to make the learning process as easy as possible. All the lessons and audio is recorded with fluent native speakers to ensure authenticity and correct accent formation. Maybe you can tell, but my first language is actually Deutsch. The way I learned English was that when I was a child, I had some English Yu-Gi-Oh cards that I could obviously not read. Fortunately, I also had some other cards in both English and German, so I could triangulate from those cards that I had in both languages to figure out what the cards I only had in English do. They gamified their app with daily lessons and recap and review quiz boss fights at the end of each week or month. You can learn hands-free even on your phone, so you can do this even while you're doing chores or working out. Go to monthly.app/Kaze to get 65% off lifetime access to 41 languages and start learning today. Let's move on to the Bob Omb feet. This one actually has a much bigger performance improvement than the eyes. The feet seem simple. They have no textures, so how can there be such a big improvement? Well, while his old feet look great, they are made of 56 triangles. For comparison, the entirety of the reworked Bob Omb's model is also 56 triangles, of which are 32 in his feet. Yes, the entire new Bob Omb is as detailed as just his old feet. Polygonally inefficient shapes are a common symptom of early 3D art, so no surprise there. While cutting the try count down, we can also bring the shape a little closer to the rendered out Bob Ombs from the painting, so that is pretty neat. Next, let's talk about their body. This one actually had me deliberate my options. There are so many we have. If you didn't know, his body is a billboarded texture. That means it's a flat plane that is simply made to always face the camera. This is actually how every round shape works in Mario 64, and even some non-round shapes like trees work like this, which leads to some bizarre visuals from certain camera angles. Billboarding is an awesome technique, because you can get a convincing round shape with just 2 triangles. Certainly a lot cheaper than trying to get a decent looking triangular sphere. One glaring issue you'd see immediately with the old Bob Omb is that it got some nasty color bending. This is because, again, they used a 32-step color format instead of a 256-step grayscale format. Again, it is also using 1-bit alpha, causing there to be some obvious staircase pattern on the texture. You may argue that this doesn't matter on the Nintendo 64's resolutions, but even Nintendo evidently disagreed. They tried to up the resolution of the Bob Omb by making his body 2 separate 32x64 textures, the highest full color resolution the Nintendo 64 can render. And let's be honest, both these issues are visible on both the Bob Omb King and on the stationary Bob Ombs, even on the Nintendo 64, although it is admittedly a lot less jarring than it is on emulators. But there are solutions. My first idea was actually a fully 3D modeled body. The issue with a flat plane is that lighting calculations don't work on it and are baked into the texture. This is of course not an issue in Mario 64, because the world lighting is actually attached to the camera in a manner that matches the lighting direction baked into the billboards. But I would really like to have real light sources in my engine. So I thought that maybe the triangles we've saved on the feet could be put to good use to make a shiny, nice reflective metal body. Unfortunately, this idea turned out to either be too high poly or pretty rough looking, and I had to discard it. And so, under tears, I had to settle on a 2D plane. The most obvious idea is to do the same thing we did for the eyes and mirror twice. After all, spheres are round. But actually this doesn't preserve the lightning direction baked into the sphere, and I think it looks a lot better with it, so we are not doing that. One idea would be to use a separate texture for the light and alpha mask. After all, the alpha mask truly is round, but we went with something slightly different. We will discard the 2 32x64 full color textures and instead use one single grayscale plus alpha texture. This does halve the texture resolution, but it looks so much smoother that most of people comparing these two textures on your screen right now would probably believe that my lower resolution texture here is at a higher resolution. Actually, the texture on the right was Lila's work, and she even found this cool color combiner for it that we can use to get the N64 to render the texture insanely smoothly. The math in the renderer here works out in a way that gives us sub-pixel precision on the alpha channel through the N64's alpha computations. Love it. Good job, Lila. Also, since it now only uses one texture instead of 2, that means we no longer need 2 separate quads on the body, which lets us half the polygon count. We could do the same thing we did for the eyes and make one single big triangle with the texture on it, but this time around I don't believe it to be worth the extra pixels the renderer would iterate, because the triangle is much bigger. So to summarize, we halved the texture loading cost, halved the polygon count, and got them to look super round while also getting rid of the color bending and the extreme alpha quantization. Very nice. But actually not so fast, suck those tears up. There is one special Bob Omb that we can justify having a polygonal body for. King Bob Omb. BioBag gave him a fully 3D modeled shape, which did blow up his body's triangle count from 4 all the way up to 248, which is a lot more expensive of course, but I'm willing to make that sacrifice for a big boss fight, and overall we are still net positive on the performance. Since he's the boss fight, this also lets us bake the lighting of the room he's in into his environment map, which gives him this much more immersive visual. You can probably tell that he has all new textures and he does cost a fair bit more in performance than his vanilla incarnation, but it is not nearly as much more expensive as you'd think just from his visuals alone, because a lot of it is saved in his armature, which is something we'll have to talk about for the normal Bob Ombs too, but maybe King Bob Omb is for another video. The last part of the Bob Omb's body we need to talk about is this hexagon top here. We have minor performance regression here, but it is for a good cause. The vanilla Bob Ombs is 16 triangles and 28 vertices. Just from the shape alone, you may think that it should be less vertices than that. After all, a hexagon only has 6 vertices, and adding another 6 at the bottom should make this up to 12, not 28. But you have to keep in mind that these vertices store light direction information. Each vertex has a vector stored inside it that, if it is facing the light, will make that vertex brighter. Since this hexagon is flat shaded with hard edges between polygons, this means there are multiple vertices in the same location with different light normals baked into them. Our new top is 20 triangles. 16 for the hexagon, just like before, and we added 4 extra ones for the fuse at the top. This gets him closer in line with his painting visuals, but it is a completely new detail. But actually it's not that grim. We can claw back some of the performance loss from these extra triangles. We can take advantage of the special flat shading mode to make the game pick the vertex normal of just one vertex to apply to the whole triangle. This is a feature built into the engine to allow for optimizations like this, but unfortunately it went mostly unused. This lets us reuse vertices across polygons and reduce the whole top part to just 16 vertices. 12 on a hexagon, like we would predict when not thinking about normals, and 4 for the fuse. Not enough to make up for the extra detail cost, but hey, at least it's something, is what I would like to say, but unfortunately our N64 optimization technology hasn't advanced that far yet. I'm using a tool called Fast64 to export my 3D models into an N64 compatible format, and while it is an amazing tool we could have only dreamed of 10 years ago with tons of optimizations I'm grateful for, it's still not fully compatible with all the optimizations our engine allows for. If you know Python, feel free to check out the tool and maybe you can help make these optimizations a reality and become a part of N64 development history. And with that, we finished this entire 3D model, but there's actually a lot more work to do on the Bob Omb. I've mentioned something about King Bob Omb's armature being cheaper before. What was that about? The armature is the skeleton that animates the Bob Omb's geometry. Every animated actor has a skeleton, and the one for the Bob Omb specifically is notoriously unoptimized. Animations can be super expensive to compute, which is why in modern Pokemon Switch games you'll see faraway Pokemon animate at low frame rates. Of course, on the more powerful Nintendo 64, we want to not do any such ugly optimizations and simply always compute the animations. In fact, simply commuting them every frame is cheaper than running them at low frame rates, because it means we don't have to temporarily store the animation state anywhere, saving us some precious data throughput. Of course, that does mean that each individual bone will add a good chunk of cost to the render process. The original Bob Omb has 18 bones, 14 of which are animation computing. Our new one only has 5, of which 3 are animation computing, and quite a difference in performance. This new armature is capable of all the same movement. The original one is just incredibly inefficient, having things such as this: 3 bones in the same location with the same rotation with all the same geometry. This is comically inefficient. We have invisible ghosts haunting the rendering pipeline. This means the Bob Omb's animation are computed almost 5 times as fast with no downsides. I want to upgrade the animations too. For example, we can make the walk animation correctly scale with the walking speed so that when they move faster, the animation speeds up appropriately. Also, just for flair, we've given them a surprise animation when they see Mario. One cool detail about the new Bob Omb is that their new material allows animated colors at no extra cost. This means we can make them flash orange at increasingly faster rate as they get close to exploding. Adds some personality and looks very fitting too. With all that, finally, let's compare the performance. A quick preamble, the Nintendo 64 is hilariously unbalanced hardware-wise. The CPU is about 4 times as fast as you would need it to be to run a game like Mario 64, and its memory throughput is too slow to run the game at full frame rate. Because of this, when we compare the performance of these two guys, we only really care about memory throughput and not CPU cycles. So while we saved 11 out of 14 animation bones and a lot of CPU power, this doesn't matter all that much unless we can skip processing data because of it. So to approximate performance, let's add up the data throughput from various sources. We will need to compute textures, armature matrices, and polygons and vertices. The textures are straightforward. You can simply add up the texture sizes for the various parts. The old Bob Omb has 8092 bytes of body and 2048 bytes of eye, for a total of 10,240 bytes. Even though our new Bob Omb looks much higher resolution, we've actually cut the texture data in less than half. We've got a 256 byte eye texture with a 4096 byte body and a 128 byte fuse for a total of 4480 bytes. Armatures are a bit more complicated. Each armature bone generates a 48 byte matrix in my engine, 64 bytes in Vanillamar 64, and needs an average 3 data cache lines to be read for rotational and hierarchy values, accounting for another 48 bytes. It also stores back a 64 byte fixed point matrix for the RSP. This gives us a total cost of 160 or 176 bytes depending on engine. We'll go with my engine because that's where this guy lives in. This gives us a total of 2240 bytes for the vanilla Bob Omb and 480 bytes for the reworked one's animations, so just under a quarter. Polygons can't really be statically determined, because the amount of data throughput largely depends on the polygon size and whether they are camera facing, so I am going to approximate each triangle to 105 bytes. This gives us a total of 8400 bytes for the vanilla Bob Omb and 5880 bytes for the reworked one's model data. Vertices are also straightforward, just multiply the vertex count by 16. This gives us 1312 bytes for the vanilla Bob Omb and, due to the optimization missing very unfortunately, 1264 bytes for the reworked vertex data. Adding it all together, the pre-reworked Bob Omb needs about 22,000 bytes and the reworked one needs about 12,000 bytes. That's just over half as expensive, about 54% of the cost, which sounds good to me. Being able to halve the cost exactly would be awesome for the bragging rights, but we're not quite there. But hey, maybe if a friendly Python programmer implements the optimization I've talked about into our model converter, we can halve it at some point. Or we could remove the fuse to get the 2x boost, but I'm attached to it now and want to keep it. Please keep in mind though that this is only an approximation and it only takes into account a couple sources of memory transfer costs. In a real game context, your values will vary wildly and be dependent on many more factors and can't be simply expressed in a number like this. To prove the performance advantage, let's compare 50 Vanillamar 64 Bob Ombs versus 50 reworked ones. The vanilla ones give us 40 FPS and the new ones give us around 50 FPS in the scene. Wow, okay, I seriously expected that rendering and computing 50 entities would lag the game a little bit more, but I guess the new engine is just that strong. Either way, let me know what you think and if there's any model you'd like to see me go over next. Shoutouts to all my Patreons for supporting my channel. It's been incredible seeing all the support I am receiving and I am having a lot of fun making these videos and working on my game. Please keep in mind that even though the game is getting close to being content complete, there's still going to be a beta testing phase and a lot of polishing going on, so I don't feel comfortable giving a release date just yet. I will only give you a release date once I actually know the game is done. I hope you can understand. And finally, yes, they are called Bob Ombs. If I catch any of you guys calling them Bob Ombs, I am going to come to your house, turn on your N64 and delete your Super